On the night of March 18, 1996, more than 350 teenagers crowded into a small disco in Quezon City, Manila. Most of them were celebrating the end of the school year. By morning, 162 of them were dead. The fire that killed them lasted less than 10 minutes. The cause was not an explosion. It was not a gas leak. It was not a bomb. The cause was something far more ordinary and far more damning. The disco's only real exit had been locked from the outside, and the fire safety inspections that should have stopped the venue from operating had never been done. Every warning that mattered was already in writing before that night. Some of it was literally written on the walls of the building. This is the story of the Ozone Disco fire, the deadliest fire in Philippine history, and it is a story about a venue that should never have been open. Start with the building itself. The Ozone Disco sat on Timog Avenue in Quezon City, a narrow two-story space wedged into a strip of commercial buildings. From the street, it looked unremarkable. Inside, it was a small windowless box. The dance floor was on the upper level. The only stairway down was a single narrow passage that opened onto one main exit door. That door was the entire safety system, and on the night of the fire, it was effectively useless. Here is what investigators later established. The disco had two doors leading to the street. One was kept locked by the management's own policy to prevent people from sneaking in without paying. The other, the working entrance, was the one everyone used to come in and out. That second door opened inward, not outward, inward. For anyone who has been in a panicked crowd, that detail is the entire disaster. A door that opens inward cannot be pushed open by a crowd pressing against it. Bodies pin it shut. The harder people push, the more impossible it becomes to open. Fire codes around the world require public assembly venues to have outward opening exits for this exact reason. Ozone did not have one. Now hold that detail in your head and look at the warnings that existed before the fire. The Ozone Disco was operating without a current building permit. Investigators found that the venue had never been issued the proper occupancy clearances for a public assembly space. It had no valid fire safety inspection certificate. Some reports indicated the management was attempting to renew or correct paperwork at the time of the fire. They were running a packed nightclub on expired permissions. The building was rated for a fraction of the crowd inside it. Estimates of capacity vary, but most accounts put the legal limit at around 35 people. On the night of the fire, more than 350 were inside, 10 times capacity, most of them teenagers, many under 18. There were no functional fire extinguishers in positions where the crowd could reach them. The sprinkler system, if one existed, did not activate. The emergency lighting was inadequate. The ventilation was poor enough that smoke filled the room within seconds. None of this was a secret. The conditions that killed those teenagers were visible to anyone walking through the door. Now, the night itself. It was a Monday, and the disco was hosting a graduation party. Several Quezon City high schools had booked the venue to celebrate the end of their school year. By around 11:30 in the evening, the dance floor was packed. Survivors later described the first sign of fire as a small flicker near the DJ booth or the stage area. Some thought it was part of the lighting show. Within seconds, it was not. Sparks ignited something flammable, possibly the foam-padded ceiling or stage decorations. The fire moved fast. Here is what cheap, flammable interior decoration does in a small windowless space. It does not burn. It flashes. The whole ceiling becomes a sheet of flame within a few seconds. The smoke that comes off it is thick and black and toxic, and it drops the visibility in the room to zero almost instantly. This is what the survivors walked into. A room of teenagers, no signs telling them which way to go, lights cut out, smoke filling the air, and a single inward opening door at the bottom of a narrow stairway. What happened next is the part that is hardest to describe with restraint. The crowd surged for the exit. The door, opening inward, could not be opened against the crush of bodies. Some survivors later said they saw people clawing at the walls in the dark, looking for a way out that did not exist. Most of the 162 who died were not killed by burns. They were killed by smoke inhalation and crushing, found stacked against the only door. They had reached the exit. The exit was the trap. Outside, family members and other partygoers tried to break in. Some succeeded in pulling people out through small gaps. Filipino news footage from the morning after shows lines of bodies on the sidewalk, most of them young, most of them in the clothes they had picked for a graduation party. The fire itself was contained within about 30 minutes. The DYing took less than 10. The investigation that followed exposed everything that had been hidden. The Quezon City government and the Bureau of Fire Protection found that the disco had been operating outside the law for months, possibly years. The required permits did not exist or had lapsed. The inspections that should have flagged the locked door, the inward opening exit, the absent fire suppression, and the dangerous overcrowding had not been carried out, or had been signed off without anyone actually visiting the building. That is the warning that should disturb every Filipino watching this. The system that was meant to catch a venue like Ozone existed. It had inspectors. It had codes. It had paperwork. It just was not being used. Criminal charges were eventually filed against the venue's owners and managers, and against several local government officials accused of negligence or complicity in allowing the disco to operate. The legal proceedings stretched on for years. Some convictions were eventually handed down. Many of the families said the outcome did not match the loss. The fire reshaped Philippine law. In its aftermath, building codes were strengthened, fire safety enforcement was overhauled, and the Bureau of Fire Protection was given expanded powers to shut down non-compliant venues. The Ozone Disco itself never reopened. The site became a memorial. To this day, families gather there every March 18th to remember the dead. But here is the harder truth, and this is where this channel's question matters most. The warnings at Ozone were not unique to Ozone. The same conditions, locked doors, missing permits, overcrowded venues, indoor pyrotechnics in spaces with one exit exist in nightclubs and event spaces around the world. Some of them are operating right now. The Station nightclub fire in Rhode Island in 2003 killed 100 people with almost identical failures. Different country, different decade, same warnings ignored. Every single one of the 162 teenagers who died at Ozone could have walked out of that building alive. If any one of those warnings had been acted on, if the door had opened outward, if the second exit had been unlocked, if the permits had been checked, if the inspectors had ever actually walked the floor, none of those things happened. Not because they were impossible, because nobody made them happen. The failure was not that nobody saw it coming. The failure was that they did. If you want to keep following the warnings the world ignored, subscribe. Every disaster leaves a paper trail. We follow it.